I woke up with rain in my mouth, one cheek pressed against black alley stones, and 5 years of death sitting behind my eyes like a locked door that had just been kicked open. For 3 seconds, I thought I was still inside the Black Antler Labyrinth. For the fourth second, I heard wagon wheels outside the Iron Lantern Hunter Guild, smelled cheap lamp oil from the guild kitchen, and saw the broken gutter above me leaking brown water in 6 steady drops.
6 drops. Pause. 6 drops.
That was when I knew something was wrong. My name was Rovan Ashkeel. I was 23 years old, a copper-ranked porter in the dungeon city of Vair, and I had just woken up 5 years before the party I trusted left me behind to die. Not almost die. Not learn a lesson die. Actually die. Or I should have. The last thing I remembered was crawling through a maintenance shaft under the Black Antler Labyrinth with a cracked rib, no lantern, and one torn receipt from the expedition supply desk stuck to my blood-soaked palm. Bastian Crowe had taken my maps, my water, my rescue flare, and my name off the raid report before the ants started clicking in the walls. He had smiled when he did it. That was the part I remembered clearest. Not the monsters, not the dark, not the cold floor under my hands. His smile. The first time I had been a worthless inventory porter, which was a polite way of saying everyone thought my skill existed so better hunters could ignore weight limits. I could store rope, rations, spare blades, bedrolls, lantern oil, and emergency chalk in a small pocket of space tied to my soul. No fireballs, no sword aura, no healing light, no wolf familiar. Just storage. In Vair, that made me useful enough to hire and weak enough to cheat. Bastian Crowe understood that perfectly. He had been silver-ranked by blood, not skill, the kind of hunter who wore polished armor to recruitment interviews and let other people carry the things that kept him alive. His family sponsored 3 guild examiners. His uncle owned a share of the Lantern Foundry. His smile could get a debt dismissed, a complaint buried, or a porter blamed. The first time, he recruited me on this exact morning. Rain Alley cheap lamp oil. Then he used me for 22 raids, stole my dungeon notes, filed my maps under his name, and abandoned me in the Black Antler Labyrinth when the boss rotation shifted. After that, he became famous. Bastian Crowe, discoverer of the Black Antler route. Bastian Crowe, master of the Hidden West Corridor. Bastian Crowe, the first hunter in Vair to chart the labyrinth's feeding cycle. Except he didn't discover any of it. I did. Unfortunately, I discovered the final secret 20 minutes before dying. Dungeons were not random. That was the truth future hunters would announce 10 years later after hundreds of dead delvers and thousands of wasted raids. Dungeons behaved like living logistics systems. Monsters patrolled because they were fed. Traps reset because mana flowed through maintenance arteries. Loot rooms opened when resource pressure shifted. Hidden doors were not mystical luck, they were service hatches. Future delvers would call the method pathway accounting. I called it the thing everyone should have noticed before I bled out in a tunnel. Track the heat, track the waste, track the mana residue, track the scratches on the stone where monsters turned too sharply because the path was narrow, track what the dungeon used, where it moved, what it discarded, and when it cleaned itself. A dungeon was a monster. A city. A stomach. A warehouse with teeth. And I had come back with the one kind of knowledge flashy hunters hated most. Accounting. I pushed myself upright, coughing rainwater, and my right hand closed around something wet and stiff. A receipt. Not a clean one, not from this morning. A torn strip of yellowed guild paper, dark at the edges, stained with blood that should not exist yet. 3 lines were visible. Black Antler Labyrinth. Auxiliary supply charge. Porter allocation Rovan Ashkeel. Then the ink moved. I froze. The letters did not rewrite themselves into instructions. There was no grand system window, no heavenly voice, no glowing announcement calling me chosen. Honestly, after everything I had been through, that would have been suspicious. The paper trembled once, and a thin line crawled across it like a route drawn by an invisible quill. Then it stopped. Beside the line appeared 3 small marks. Drip pattern unknown. Thermal rhythm unknown. Waste trail unknown. I stared at it until rain ran down my lashes. Well, I whispered, that is either a blessing or a very organized curse. The paper faded from sight when I loosened my fingers. When I gripped it again, it returned, visible only to me, bound to the hand I had died with. It did not give answers. It wanted records. That was when the guild's back door opened, and a boy in a stained apron tossed a bucket of dishwater into the alley. He saw me and jumped. "Ashkeel, why are you sleeping behind the guild?" "Because I was abandoned by my party and eaten by the consequences of poor documentation, apparently." I didn't say that. I stood slowly, checking my body, younger, thinner, both knees intact, no scar across my left palm yet. My inventory space felt shallow, barely enough to hold 40 standard pounds. Copper rank weak.
Alive.
From inside the guild hall, a bell rang once. Morning recruitment.
My stomach tightened.
In 12 minutes, Bastian Crowe would walk through the front hall in a blue cloak trimmed with fake silver thread. He would ask the quartermaster for one obedient porter, preferably quiet. He would look at me like a man choosing a cheap pack mule. The first time I had been grateful. My younger sister Nira had needed moonlung medicine, 1 vial every 9 days, and porters didn't earn enough unless a hunter party took them into real dungeons. Bastian's offer had felt like rescue. It had been a leash. I wiped rain from my face, tucked the invisible receipt inside my sleeve, and headed toward the guild door. The boy with the bucket blinked at me. "You look awful." "I had a bad morning."
"You just woke up."
That was the bad part. Inside, the Iron Lantern Hunter Guild smelled exactly the way I remembered: wet leather, coal smoke, old beer, and monster disinfectant. Hunters crowded the main hall under iron chandeliers, laughing too loudly and comparing blades that had seen less action than the kitchen knives. The copper board hung on the east wall: porter work, scout work, trap assistant work, hazard pay if your body came back identifiable. I used to read that board like prayer. Now I read it like evidence. At the supply counter, old Quartermaster Hask was arguing with a red-haired junior auditor over missing flare seals. I recognized her immediately, though she didn't know me yet. Elira Venn. In the first timeline, she had been a junior clerk nobody listened to. 5 years later, after the Black Antler scandal had already made Bastian rich, she became the guild's most feared root auditor. She had uncovered 3 false discovery claims, 2 corpse insurance fraud rings, and 1 noble-sponsored dungeon smuggling scheme by doing something revolutionary. She counted things. I liked her already. She caught me looking and raised an eyebrow. "Do you need something, Porter Ashkeel?" I almost laughed. In the first timeline, she didn't learn my name until she read it off the death registry. "Not yet," I said, "but if someone files a party sheet today and the porter role is restricted to carry duties only, does that limit liability?" Her eyebrow climbed higher. "That is an oddly specific morning question. I like to start the day with paperwork anxiety." Quartermaster Hask snorted. Elira studied me for 2 seconds longer than comfortable. "If the contract states porter only, the porter is not responsible for scouting, mapping, trap calls, route decisions, combat choices, treasure authentication, or tactical warnings beyond immediate hazard notice." "How immediate?" "Within visible range." "Good to know." "It also means," she added, "if the party ignores a porter's immediate hazard notice and continues, responsibility remains with the registered route lead." There it was. A small rule, boring, dry, written in black ink on page 12 of the Guild Operations Manual. A rule Bastian would step on like a loose nail. The front doors opened. The hall quieted by exactly 1 arrogant degree. Bastian Crowe walked in wearing the same blue cloak, the same polished boots, and the same expression of inherited importance. Behind him came Selene Pike, his archer sharp-eyed and sharper-tongued, Audric Voss, shieldman broad enough to block a doorway and usually just as thoughtful, and Maylis Thorn, a flame mage who smiled whenever someone poorer than her flinched. My old party. My old executioners, dressed for recruitment. Bastian's eyes swept the hall and landed on me. I felt the past and present overlap so strongly my hand twitched toward a scar I no longer had. Then he smiled. "You," he said, "Porter, what's your capacity?" The first time I had stood straighter and said, 40 pounds, sir, but I'm improving." This time I looked him in the eye. 40 pounds, I said, "Exactly." Bastian seemed pleased by the word exactly. Men like him enjoyed limits when those limits belonged to other people. He came closer, rain shining on his cloak like he had staged it. I'm putting together a 6-hour survey run, low danger, good pay, Black Antler Labyrinth, outer ring only. I need someone to carry supply allotments and keep quiet. Black Antler. Even hearing the name made the invisible receipt warm against my wrist. The first time I had not entered Black Antler until months later. Bastian had recruited me with smaller dungeons first, built trust, taken notes, learned how I organized supplies, then used my maps when the labyrinth opened for deeper licensing. But this was not the first timeline anymore. Something had shifted. Maybe regression dragged the dungeon's attention backward with me, maybe the receipt had nudged fate. Maybe Bastian had always intended to test Black Antler earlier and I had forgotten because memory is rude like that. Either way, the trap was arriving ahead of schedule. Elira's gaze flicked from him to me. Outer Ring survey, she asked. Black Antler is under restricted observation this week. Bastian did not look at her. Observation is not closure. No, Elira said. Closure requires dead people first. The guild tries to be more organized now. A few hunters laughed under their breath. Bastian's smile tightened. Junior Auditor Ven, I have provisional clearance from Examiner Crowe. Of course he did. His uncle. He placed a folded authorization on the counter. Hask opened it, grunted, and reached for the party ledger. My fingers brushed the receipt inside my sleeve. The moving line appeared across the paper in my mind, not in my eyes. Recruitment variance detected. Pattern requires confirmation. So the receipt notice changes. Good. Terrible but good. Bastian turned back to me, interested. I thought of my sister coughing into a cloth in our rented room above the cooper's shop. I thought of the medicine seller tapping the invoice with one clean fingernail. I thought of the first timeline where I accepted because I was desperate, then kept accepting because desperation teaches obedience faster than any master. How much? I asked. 2 silver for the day. The first time he offered 1. Elira's mouth flattened. She knew overpayment was bait, clever woman. Hazard share? I asked. Selene laughed, for carrying bags. Bastian lifted one hand like a generous prince calming peasants. A porter can receive a half share of incidental salvage if the party lead approves. Which meant no. What role on the sheet? I asked. Porter. Porter only. His eyes narrowed a fraction. That a problem? No, I prefer clean edges. Audric leaned toward Selene. He talks like a clerk. Clerks live longer than heroes, I said before I could stop myself. The hall went quiet enough for the rain to be heard against the windows. Bastian studied me with new interest but not respect, never respect. You have a mouth for someone with copper rank. And a back rated for 40 pounds exactly. Elira coughed into her fist. It might have been a laugh. Hask definitely smiled. Bastian decided I was entertaining, which was fine. Being underestimated as amusing was better than being noticed as dangerous. He signed the party sheet. I signed beneath him. Porter only. Carry duties only. No mapping duties. No root authority. No tactical responsibility. Elira sanded the ink, then looked at me. Would you like a copy? Bastian waved dismissively. He doesn't need one. I asked him. That was the first moment Elira became my ally in this life. Not dramatically, no vows, no tearful recognition. Just one person in a guild hall insisting that the weak should receive their paperwork. Yes, I said, I would like a copy. Bastian's smile returned, thinner now. Careful, Ashkeel, too much paper makes a porter think he's management. Only if the paper is properly filed. Hask made a choking noise. Elira copied the contract and pressed it into my hand. Our fingers brushed. She said quietly, Black Antler's outer ring has had 4 route deviations in 14 days. Don't step where the moss grows gray. I looked at her. Gray moss waste moisture, antler larvae digestion trails. She already had one piece of the puzzle. In the first timeline, no one listened to her for years. Thank you, I said, that may matter. Her eyes sharpened. You know something. I know enough to count. Before she could ask more, Bastian clapped once. Porter supplies. The supply list was familiar in the way nightmares are familiar.
3 lanterns. 2 oil flasks.
1 coil of rope.
4 ration tins. 6 chalk sticks.
1 sealed emergency flare. 1 folded stretcher.
1 antitoxin kit.
Total weight 39 pounds and 8 ounces. I remembered the first Black Antler raid where Bastian blamed me for not carrying extra oil he had never assigned. He had shouted in front of everyone while Selene called me useless and Melis told the guild I had poor initiative. So this time when Hask slid an extra oil flask toward me and muttered, "Take it anyway," I did not touch it. Bastian noticed, "You can carry a little more. My listed capacity is 40 pounds exactly.
It's just 1 flask.
It is not assigned." His expression cooled, "I'm assigning it now."
Then the supply sheet needs updating.
Selene rolled her eyes, "Saints below, he is a clerk." Elira leaned over the counter, "He is correct, any added hazard supply changes load responsibility, initial here."
Bastian stared at her.
She stared back with the fearless misery of someone paid too little to fear nobles.
He initialed. I accepted the flask.
41 pounds and 4 ounces. My inventory skill shivered as the load crossed its comfortable limit. A dull ache spread behind my eyes. The receipt warmed.
Load stress confirmed.
Inventory boundary responsive.
Spatial sense 1%.
I nearly dropped the oil.
Not because of the weight.
Because for the first time in both lives, my worthless skill had grown. Only by a breath, a hairline crack opening in a locked room, but I felt it.
The space inside me was not just storage. It had edges, pressure, balance. A route.
Future dungeon theory said every spatial skill followed the same principles as dungeon corridors. Capacity was not about strength, it was about flow management. Items settled better when arranged by weight, volatility, frequency of use, and mana friction. In the future, porters became route masters because they learned to treat inventory like a miniature dungeon. In the present, everyone shoved things in like a child packing a sack. I closed my eyes for half a second and rearranged the load. Oil away from flare. Rope coiled around ration tins. Chalk in the low-friction pocket near the opening.
Stretcher folded flat against the back wall of the space. The headache eased. The receipt pulsed once. Load stress resolved. Spatial sense 2%.
A laugh rose in my throat, sharp and dangerous. I swallowed it. Bastian mistook my silence for submission. "Good, maybe you can be trained."
Maybe.
We left the guild through the north gate with rain still falling over Veyer's black rooftops. The city had been built around 7 dungeon mouths, which meant every street sloped toward danger or profit. Lantern shops, healer stalls, salvage brokers, curse appraisers, pawn shrines, and funeral bead sellers crowded the avenue. Veyer was practical like that. It sold you a sword in one shop and a coffin in the next. As we walked, Bastian explained rules I already knew, mostly to hear himself sound important. Stay behind Audric, do not touch doors, do not identify treasure, do not speak during combat unless asked, do not wander, do not mark walls, do not interfere with route decisions. Your job is to carry what I assign and hand it over when ordered.
Malicious compliance is a strange comfort. It feels like obedience from the outside.
From the inside, it feels like sharpening a knife made of rules. "I understand," I said, "porter only." He smiled again, "Exactly." The Black Antler Labyrinth waited beyond the eastern quarry, half buried in a hill shaped like a sleeping animal. Its entrance was a stone arch grown with black branching horn-like roots. Rain steamed when it touched them. The first time I reached that arch, I thought it looked dead. Now I knew better. The roots were not decoration. They were exhaust veins. Warm air breathed out in slow intervals.
9 seconds. Pause. 9 seconds.
The receipt appeared in my hand without me calling it. Thermal rhythm unconfirmed. I stepped closer, pretending to adjust the rope in my inventory. Warm breath on my face, 9 seconds, pause, 9 seconds, pause, a longer pulse after the 6th exhale. Like a bellows feeding a furnace. I pressed one thumb to the receipt. Thermal rhythm confirmed, outer ring respiration. Trap reset window, after long pulse.
Spatial sense 4%.
My knees almost went weak. Bastian glanced back, problem. No. Then keep up. We entered the labyrinth. The tunnel swallowed the rain first, then the light, then the sound of the city. Black Antler was not like the clean training dungeons near the academy. It was damp, ribbed, and too warm. The walls looked like stone until the lanterns shifted, and then you saw the grain running through them like old bone. Selene wrinkled her nose. Smells worse than the reports. Audric grunted, smells like wet dog. Antler larvae, I said. All three turned. I remembered the contract. Visible hazard notice only. I lifted one hand and pointed to the gray moss along the left wall. Waste trail, something feeds nearby. Bastian looked at the moss, then at me. You a monster scholar now. No, porter only. Then be one quietly. I nodded. Warning given. Ignored. The receipt warmed. Waste trail partially confirmed. Responsibility shift recorded. Interesting. The ledger wasn't just tracking the dungeon. It was tracking decisions. That made sense in a horrible way. A route was not only stone and monsters. A route was choices, who led, who followed, who ignored the smell of antler larvae because a porter noticed it first. We reached the first split after 11 minutes. The right tunnel sloped downward, dry and narrow. The left tunnel widened, lined with gray moss. The first time I would have assumed wide meant safe. Now I felt the dungeon breathing. Heat moved through the left tunnel in shallow waves, too regular, too clean, reset corridor. The right tunnel was cooler, with scratches along the lower wall where small creatures dragged supply husks. A service path. Bastian lifted his lantern toward the left. There, he said, main passage. I looked at the moss. You may want the right tunnel. Selene groaned, again. Bastian turned slowly. Why? Left wall is fed, moss is fresh, floor dust has been cleared recently, something maintains that passage. Melee smiled, or the dungeon is clean there because no monsters use it. That was not how anything worked. Bastian stepped close enough that I smelled mint on his breath. Ashkeel, your role. Porter only. Correct, carry the supplies. I nodded once, then this is my one immediate hazard warning, the left tunnel is active. He held my gaze for a long second. Then he walked left. The others followed. I waited half a breath, then followed too. That sounds foolish, I know. But there are moments when avoiding a trap saves only you, and moments when letting arrogant people enter the edge of one creates proof. I needed proof. Not death, not injury, just enough consequence for the guild record to start leaning in the right direction. After 32 steps, the floor clicked. Audric froze, pressure plate. Bastian's face tightened, nobody move. The walls exhaled heat. Long pulse. Trap reset window. I counted silently. 3, 2, 1. A row of bone darts snapped from the wall ahead, not at us but across the corridor we would have entered if we had kept walking. They shattered against the opposite stone and dissolved into pale dust. No one was hurt. Everyone understood they could have been. Selene's face lost color. Melee stopped smiling. Bastian looked back at me. I kept my expression mild, which took more strength than carrying 41 pounds of supplies. Lucky guess, he said. Of course. The receipt burned softly against my wrist. Trap reset predicted. Spatial sense 7%. First milestone. Not power anyone would applaud, not a flaming sword, not a heroic aura. Just the ability to know when the dungeon was about to clear its throat. Still, in a place built to punish wrong steps, 7% was not small. It was the difference between a grave and a path. After the dark corridor, Bastian became very interested in pretending nothing had happened. That was another thing I remembered about him. He never admitted danger if someone else had noticed it first. He would rather walk confidently into a pit than cautiously around advice from a porter. We continued through the left tunnel because turning back would have looked like listening to me. The labyrinth rewarded his pride with inconvenience. Not disaster, not yet. Dungeons rarely spend their best punishments early. They test you first, they watch what kind of fool you are. Black Antler tested Bastian with 3 minor choices. At the second split, he chose a tunnel with no insect scratches and too much clean air. It ended at a sealed stone face after 7 minutes, he blamed old maps. At the third split, he ignored a trail of powdered shell under a ledge. 6 fist-sized antler mites dropped onto Audric's shield, chittering. The party dealt with them quickly, but Maylis burned 1 ration tin by accident. At the fourth split, Bastian ordered me to hand over chalk so Selene could mark the wall. I gave him 1 stick. He held out his hand. More. How many? All of them. I tilted my head. All 6. Yes. For route marking. His jaw flexed. Are you hard of hearing? No, just confirming the assignment. He snatched the chalk. All chalk assigned to route lead. I said understood. He did not know why that mattered. But Elira would. In the first timeline, Bastian claimed I had failed to mark escape routes properly. He said the porter had been responsible for chalk and route notation. No one checked because no one cared. This time, every small responsibility moved away from me by his own voice. Malicious compliance is mostly patience. I carried what he assigned. I handed over what he ordered. I gave warnings only when hazards were immediate and visible. I did not explain future dungeon theory. I did not beg to be believed. I did not rescue his pride from the consequences of wearing it like armor. At the 5th corridor, the receipt tugged at my hand. Not physically, more like my inventory space shifted toward the right wall. I slowed. There was a dark smear near the floor, hidden under a shelf of root-like stone, not blood, too dry, too regular. Waste pellet dust. Antler mites carried scraps from feeding chambers to disposal cracks. Future root masters used those trails to locate service corridors because dungeons hated waste buildup. Even magical murder mazes need plumbing. I crouched. Selene snapped, what now? I picked up 1 small black fragment shaped like a broken horn tip. Drop salvage, I said. Bastian glanced over. Worthless. Antler fragments sell for 3 copper a handful. Then I request it as incidental salvage. He laughed. Fine, porter gets trash. Selene smirked. Careful, he'll build a kingdom out of bug horns. I slid the fragment into my pocket. The receipt's line extended. Resource fragment, 1 of 3. Waste trail confirmed. Monster supply path, 12% mapped. Spatial sense, 10%. The dungeon changed. Not visibly, the walls did not glow, trumpets did not play. No ancient spirit announced that Rovan Ashkeel, professional bag holder, had achieved enlightenment through garbage. But I felt a thin, cool thread behind the right wall. A passage. Hidden. Not open to hunters, not part of the heroic route. A maintenance corridor used by the labyrinth to move small monsters, mana residue, and discarded shell. A route no one flashy would ever find because it was marked by dirt. I stood. Bastian was already moving again. He had found a descending corridor lined with black roots that curved like antlers overhead. His lantern light glittered on mineral deposits at the far end. Gold-colored. Fake treasure. I remembered that room. Not from my first Black Antler raid with Bastian. From my final death deeper in the labyrinth when I crawled past the back of it through a maintenance shaft and saw the mechanism from behind. The room generated fool's amber every reset cycle to lure large predators away from service arteries. Hunters saw treasure. The dungeon saw bait. Bastian, I said. He stopped, shoulders stiff. The room ahead is too warm, no dust on the threshold. The shine is probably lure mineral. He turned. Probably. Yes. Based on your extensive experience as a porter. Based on the smell. Maylis laughed softly. Now he smells treasure quality. Audric shifted his shield. He had been quiet since the darts. Captain. Maybe we test the floor first. Bastian's eyes flashed. He could ignore me, but a shieldman questioning him in front of the party was harder. So he compromised in the stupidest possible way. We test quickly, he said, then proceed. He ordered me to place a lantern at the threshold. I did. He ordered Audric to tap the floor with his spear. Audric did. Nothing happened. Because the trap did not care about the floor. It cared about body heat crossing the amber line. Bastian smiled like he had personally defeated caution, satisfied. I looked at the golden glow. No. He stepped inside.
Selene followed. Melis followed. Audric hesitated, then followed because loyalty is often just peer pressure with armor. I remained outside the threshold. Bastian turned back, Porter. My assigned position is behind the party with supplies. Then enter. Is that a direct order to cross the threshold? His face darkened, yes. The receipt warmed. I took one step forward, just enough for my boot to hover above the amber line. Then the room clicked. Not loudly, not dramatically. A soft internal sound, like a lock remembering its job. The golden mineral dimmed, the entrance stones began sliding down from the ceiling. Selene swore. Melee spun. Audric shoved his shield under the descending slab, buying maybe 4 seconds. Bastian's eyes met mine across the threshold. For a beautiful little moment, he understood I had been right. Then he shouted, "Get in here and help." I reached into my inventory and pulled out the folded stretcher. Not the rope, not the flare, not the oil. The stretcher. Because that was what sat nearest the opening after my load arrangement, because I had practiced, because inventory was a route and mine was becoming efficient. I snapped the stretcher poles together and shoved them under the slab beside Audric's shield. The mechanism slowed. Out, I said. Audric moved first, dragging Melis by the sleeve. Selene slid under with a scrape across her leather shoulder. Bastian came last, losing his pretty blue cloak when the stone caught the hem and pinned it. He stumbled into the corridor cloakless, furious and breathing hard. The slab sealed. Behind it, the fake treasure room gave one soft digestive sigh. No one spoke for 6 full seconds. Then Bastian rounded on me. You hesitated. I blinked. I warned you. You disobeyed. You ordered me to enter. The trap activated before my foot landed. Selene pointed at the sealed room. You knew. I suspected. Melis's voice was thin. You could have explained better. I am Porter only. That landed harder than I expected. Audric looked away. Bastian stepped close. Listen carefully, Ashkeel. I do not know what game you're playing, but if you embarrass me again, I will make sure no party in Veyr hires you. There it was. The threat behind the smile. The first timeline had been full of those quiet corners, soft voices, career death held over medicine money. My old self would have apologized. My new self thought of Nira's medicine, yes, but I also thought of 5 years of stolen maps and a death report that called me missing due to panic. I understand, I said. He seemed satisfied. He should not have been. While he argued with Selene about whether to continue, I crouched near the sealed threshold and found the second Black Antler fragment wedged in a drainage groove. Resource fragment 2 of 3. Lure chamber confirmed. Monster supply path 24% mapped. Spatial sense 15%. A second thread opened in my awareness. Not just behind the wall now. Under us. The fake treasure room drained heat downward after activation. That heat fed egg chambers required worker paths connected to maintenance corridors. The labyrinth was not a maze. It was an economy. And Bastian Crowe was bad at economics. We moved again after he cut his ruined cloak free and threw it at me. Carry that. I checked the weight. It exceeds assigned load unless another item is removed. Selene made an exhausted sound. Oh, for the love of. Bastian grabbed one ration tin from the supply allotment and hurled it down the corridor. There, removed. I stored the cloak. The receipt warmed. Ration discarded by route lead. Supply negligence recorded. I almost smiled. The discarded ration tin clattered into darkness. Something clicked in response. Far away at first. Then closer. Audric lifted his shield. That sounded big. I looked down the corridor where the tin had vanished. The air shifted, carrying a sour mineral smell and the dry scrape of many small legs. Not big. Many. Bastian had thrown food into a monster supply path. The dungeon accepted his contribution. I gave my required warning that ration tin may draw scavengers. Bastian's face twisted. One more word. So I gave him no more words. The first wave of antler mites arrived 2 minutes later. Small, fast, more annoying than dangerous, Audric blocked, Selene shot, Meles burned, Bastian cut two apart and acted like that had been the plan. The second wave came from behind. That was when panic started to nibble at the party's edges. Not enough to break them, they were competent in the narrow way hunters can be competent. They could fight what stood in front of them, they just could not understand why the dungeon kept making sure something stood there. I understood. Bastian was creating waste, heat, noise, and blood residue in a maintenance feeding loop. He was ringing a dinner bell and calling it leadership. During the confusion, I found the third fragment stuck to the underside of a broken shell. It was larger than the others, curved like a tiny black crown. The moment I touched it, the receipt unfolded across my palm. 3 confirmed resource fragments. Maintenance corridor access condition met. Root ledger awakening partial. Spatial sense 21%. The right wall breathed. A seam appeared where no seam had been. Narrow, low, hidden behind gray moss and a root-like rib of stone. A service hatch. Only I saw it open. Inside was darkness cooler than the main corridor, threaded with faint blue mana veins, a path built for maintenance creatures, not armored fools. I could have left then. I could have slipped through, reached the outer exit, gone to Elira, and filed a report while Bastian's party wasted hours fighting scavengers. But the root authority token was deeper. And if I left too early, Bastian would still twist the story. He would say I ran, he would say I sabotaged them, he would say a porter panicked and abandoned the party. Again. No. This time, I needed the dungeon itself to testify. So I waited until Bastian shouted, "We push forward." The treasure room was a false lead, but the density of monsters means there is a core path nearby. That sentence was so wrong it nearly qualified as art. I gave my calm warning, more monsters can also mean a feeding path, not a core path. He pointed his sword at me, porter only. I nodded. Then I followed him deeper. The deeper outer ring of Black Antler had 3 kinds of silence. The first was ordinary dungeon silence, made of stone, distance, and hunters trying not to admit they were lost. The second was predator silence, where even your own breathing felt too loud. The third was maintenance silence. That was the one nobody in the present knew about yet. Maintenance silence happened after the dungeon finished moving resources through an area. The air cooled, the moss tightened, small creatures vanished into cracks, traps paused while mana pressure equalized. It felt safe, which made it dangerous because hunters relaxed exactly when the dungeon was resetting its internal shelves. We entered maintenance silence after the 9th wrong turn. Bastian's chalk marks had stopped matching the walls. That was not magic, it was worse. He had marked living stone during a respiration cycle. The outer surface shifted by less than an inch each time the labyrinth exhaled. Over an hour, that inch became a lie. Selene stared at 2 identical chalk arrows pointing in opposite directions. That's impossible. No, I said before I remembered I was enjoying silence. It's just inconvenient. Bastian rounded on me, explain. I looked at the arrows. The wall surface moves during thermal pulses, chalk on active stone drifts. Meles whispered, walls do not drift. I touched the nearest rib of stone, it was warm. Everything moves if it breathes slowly enough. Audric muttered, I hate that sentence. Bastian's face was pale now, but pride kept him standing straight. Then how do we navigate? 4 faces turned toward me. There it was. The moment weak people are suddenly useful. In the first timeline, I would have poured out everything I knew for 1 crumb of approval. I would have saved them, guided them, mapped the route. And thanked them for letting me be exploited. This time, I remembered the contract. My registered role is porter only, I said. Selene's mouth opened. Bastian looked like I had slapped him with a law book. You are refusing a route order during active hazard, he asked. No, I am not registered for route orders. I can provide immediate hazard warnings within visible range. I can carry assigned supplies. I cannot assume mapping responsibility. You arrogant littles. Audric stepped between us, not aggressively but enough. Captain, we need to exit. Bastian's pride fought his survival instinct. Survival won by a narrow margin. Fine, he said through his teeth,
Temporary verbal assignment. I authorize Porter Rovan Ashkeel to assist with route identification. Elira would love that sentence. I shook my head. Requires written amendment for liability transfer. Selene threw both hands up. Are we seriously doing paperwork in a dungeon? Yes, I said, that is where liability usually happens. Audric made a sound that might have been a laugh if we were not surrounded by breathing stone. Bastian had no paper except the route sheet. He tore a blank corner from it, wrote 3 angry lines, signed his name, and shoved it at me. I read it carefully. Temporary route assistance. No treasure claim transfer. No map ownership transfer. No liability acceptance for prior route decisions. Sloppy but useful. I can assist, I said. Bastian leaned close. Get us out. That was the funny thing. He thought he was giving me a command. He was giving me proof. I closed my eyes and let my spatial sense stretch. 21% was not much, but inside the labyrinth it felt like having one eye open after years of blindness. Heat moved left, waste moved down, small monsters moved along narrow cracks behind the walls, mana residue gathered where traps had reset recently, air breathed toward exits in tiny pressure changes. A dungeon route was never a line. It was a balance sheet. Inputs, outputs, losses, waste, storage, movement. Not back, I said. Back path is unstable. We take the service corridor. Bastian looked around. What service corridor? I walked to the right wall and pressed the 3 black antler fragments into the seam. The wall opened. Not dramatically, it folded inward like a tired clerk opening a side door after hours. Selene whispered, how did you? Worthless trash, I said, stepping inside. For once nobody corrected me. The maintenance corridor was barely tall enough for Audric to crouch through. Blue veins pulsed along the walls. The air smelled of cold iron and old roots. Tiny antler mites watched us from cracks but did not attack. They were workers. We were not on their schedule. The receipt updated as I moved. Maintenance corridor entered. Service flow confirmed. Monster supply path 41% mapped. Spatial sense 29%. Second milestone. I could feel doors now. Not see, feel. Every hidden seam had a different pressure signature, like a lock holding its breath. Minor doors, service hatches, waste gates, reset vents, none of them obeyed me yet, but they acknowledged me. That was more respect than I had received from the guild in 5 years. Halfway through the corridor, we reached a circular chamber with 3 low exits and a black root pillar in the center. Old fragments lay around its base like shed antlers. I knew this place. In the first timeline, I had crawled here with blood in my mouth after Bastian left me behind. I had found the pillar, touched it, and seen the root authority token sealed inside. I had understood too late that the labyrinth recorded its own roots, its own violations, its own proper authorities. Then the boss rotation shifted. Then darkness. Now I stood there alive, with Bastian breathing behind me. The receipt shook so hard it nearly slipped from my hand. Root authority node detected. Eligibility incomplete. Confirm 3 patterns. I looked at the paper. 3 empty lines appeared. Thermal rhythm. Waste trail. Supply path. I had confirmed them all, but not at the node. Of course, the dungeon did not accept theory, it accepted demonstrated accounting. It wanted proof. So I gave it proof. I pressed my palm to the root pillar and spoke softly, not to the party but to the labyrinth. Outer ring respiration cycles every 9 seconds with extended pulse after 6 breaths. Trap reset follows the extended pulse by 3 counts. The pillar warmed. Gray moss marks waste moisture from antler larvae and scavenger mites. Fresh moss indicates fed corridors, not safe corridors. The root veins brightened. Golden lure chambers drain heat downward after activation, feeding egg chambers through service paths. Discarded rations attract scavenger waves into the same loop. The floor trembled. Behind me, Melis whispered, "What is he doing?" Bastian said nothing. For once, a wise choice. The 3 black antler fragments rose from my hand and sank into the pillar. Something clicked open inside the root. A small token slid out. It was not gold, not jeweled. Not impressive in any way a noble would recognize. It looked like a flat piece of black horn carved with branching lines too fine to read. The Root Authority token. The thing future hunters would kill careers over. The thing I had died inches from claiming. When I touched it, the receipt and token fused for one breath. Pain lanced through my hand, clean and cold, not injury, recognition. Root Authority provisional. Ledger bearer Rovan Ashkeel. Confirmed patterns 3. Minor door command unlocked. Spatial sense 38%. Third milestone. The chamber's 3 exits opened in my awareness. Left led toward the outer entrance but crossed an active trap reset. Center led toward a sealed salvage pocket. Right led toward a registry vent that connected to the guild's official root crystal. The root crystal. My heart beat once hard. Every licensed dungeon invader had a root crystal tied to the Hunter Guild. Most only recorded entries, exits, deaths, and major boss kills, but Black Antler was older, more bureaucratic, more alive. If I reached the registry vent, the labyrinth could record not just where we went. It could record who made each decision. That was the hidden leverage. Not revenge by blade. Revenge by minutes, roots, warnings, assignments, and signatures. Bastian saw the token in my hand. Greed returned to his face so quickly it was almost comforting. Fear had made him cautious, greed made him predictable. "What is that?" he asked. "Dungeon tool." "Hand it over." "No." The word came out calm. The chamber chilled. Audric shifted, Seleni's fingers tightened around her bow. Maylis glanced between us like she was calculating which side would still have a career tomorrow. Bastian stepped forward. Everything found during a registered raid belongs to the party lead pending distribution. Incidental salvage under 3 copper was awarded to the porter by party lead. His eyes flicked to the pillar. He understood, not everything but enough. The fragments were trash. Yes. That token is not. The token was accessed using the fragments you awarded. Do you think the guild will side with a porter over me? There it was again. The entire shape of his world in one sentence. Not are you right. Not what does the rule say. Who will they believe? I closed my fingers around the token. I think the guild will side with its own records. He laughed once. Records can be interpreted. Then let's make them detailed. I turned toward the right exit. Bastian grabbed my shoulder. The token went cold. A minor door behind us slammed shut. Not hard enough to crush, not dramatic enough to injure, just a clean stone barrier between Bastian's hand and the path back. Everyone froze. I looked at his hand on my shoulder. He removed it. Smart. Temporary but smart. Did you do that? Selene asked. I think the door objected. Audric stared at me. Can you open it? I felt the pressure in the stone, a latch made of mana flow and root permission. Yes. Bastian swallowed anger, then opened the exit path. I looked at the 3 roots again. The left path to the entrance would let them leave shaken but able to lie. The right path to the registry vent would take 12 minutes longer and pass 1 minor reset hazard. Not deadly if counted correctly. Very revealing. The safest registered exit is this way, I said and stepped right. Bastian did not know the difference between safe for the body and safe for the truth. That was his problem. The registry vent was a narrow passage lined with old guild seals embedded in the root walls. Most were cracked. One still glowed faint amber, pulsing toward the city. I stopped before it. The receipt spread across my palm. Official root crystal connection detected. Upload requires active dispute or death claim. I almost laughed. Even the dungeon needed a filing trigger. Bastian gave me one faster than I expected. He said loudly, when we get out, I'm reporting you for sabotage. Selene closed her eyes. Audric muttered, Captain. Maylis whispered, maybe don't. But Bastian was already building the version of the story where he remained important. You concealed root knowledge, manipulated salvage, triggered hidden mechanisms, and endangered a registered party. I will see you stripped of guild access. The amber seal brightened. Active dispute detected. Root record sealed. Thank you, Bastian. I looked back at him. You're sure that is your official position?
Yes.
Good. The root token pulsed. Somewhere far away beneath the Iron Lantern Guild, a crystal began recording. Getting out of Black Antler took 29 minutes. It would have taken 17 if Bastian had stopped arguing. I guided us through 3 minor doors, 2 cooling vents, and 1 service crawl that left Audric cursing quietly because his shoulders barely fit. I predicted 1 trap reset, waded through it, and opened a hatch into the outer ring 80 steps from the entrance arch. No one thanked me. That was fine. Gratitude was not on the contract. When daylight hit us, Bastian recovered his confidence like a drunk finding a wall. By the time we reached the quarry road, he had rearranged the story in his head. I could see it happening. His chin lifted, his voice steadied. He stopped looking at the token in my hand and started looking toward the city where his uncle worked, where his name mattered, where porters were expected to fold under accusation. Selene walked apart from him. Audric stayed near me without saying anything. Maylis kept rubbing soot from her sleeve and staring at the ground. Halfway to Veyer, Bastian said, "You should give me the token before this becomes uglier." I looked at the rain clouds breaking over the city walls. No. You don't understand politics. I understand roots. Roots won't protect your sister. That stopped me. My whole body went still. He smiled because he thought he had found the handle. "There it is," he said softly. "Nira, isn't it? Moonlung medicine is expensive, guild work is fragile, a bad report from me and you'll be back hauling coal sacks for copper bits." In the first timeline, that threat would have worked. Not because I was a coward. Because medicine turns pride into a luxury item. I looked at him and felt something inside me settle, cold and level. "You investigated my family before hearing me." "I investigate all liabilities." "No," I said, "you investigate leverage." His smile thinned. Elira had once written in an audit report that predatory parties follow patterns. Identify debt, offer advancement, isolate the worker, blur duties, steal credit, assign blame. At the time, the city called her dramatic. After the third corpse insurance scandal, they called her thorough. I wondered what she would call this. We reached the Iron Lantern Guild at third afternoon bell. The main hall was busier than before. Rain had driven half the city's hunters inside, and a dispute near the appraisal counter had drawn spectators. Perfect. Bastian strode in first, cloak ruined, armor scratched, dignity patched together with fury. "Formal complaint," he announced. Every head turned. Elira looked up from the audit desk. Her eyes moved from Bastian to me, then to the token in my hand. She stood. Quartermaster Hask muttered, "Oh, this'll be expensive." Examiner Crowe emerged from the upper office within 2 minutes, which told me Bastian had a family signal system faster than emergency rescue. He was a tall man with silver at his temples and the relaxed expression of someone accustomed to being believed before speaking. He looked at Bastian's torn cloak, then at me. "What happened?" Bastian did not waste time. He accused me beautifully. Sabotage, concealment, disobedience, unauthorized route manipulation, theft of dungeon salvage, endangerment of a silver-sponsored party, attempted extortion by refusing to surrender a root artifact. If lying were a combat skill, he would have been gold-ranked. The hall listened. Some hunters glared at me automatically. People love a familiar story, and Porter got greedy was easier to swallow than Noble Hunter ignored every warning like an expensive idiot. I waited until he finished. Examiner Crowe turned to me with bored contempt. "Porter Ashkeel, do you deny interfering with the raid?" I complied with my registered role. Bastian laughed. "You call opening hidden doors compliance." I was temporarily assigned route assistance in writing after the party became lost due to route lead decisions. I held out the torn amendment. Elira moved faster than Examiner Crowe. She took it, read it, and her mouth did a tiny thing that was not quite a smile. "This appears valid," she said. Crowe's eyes narrowed. "Junior auditor, this is a disciplinary matter." "Yes," she said, "that is why documentation is helpful." The hall murmured. Bastian's face reddened. He forced that by refusing aid. I looked at Elira. "May I provide sequence?" "Please do," she said.
Examiner Crowe opened his mouth. Elira added, for the complaint record. That trapped him. Even corrupt men respect procedure when witnesses are watching. So I told the story. Not emotionally, not dramatically, just the route. Contract signed at morning bell, porter-only roll, extra oil flask added and initialed by party lead, first warning at Grey Moss corridor, left tunnel chosen by route lead, trap reset occurred, chalk transferred to route lead on direct order, fake treasure room warning given, party entered, door sealed, stretcher deployed, ration tin discarded by route lead, scavenger waves followed, temporary route assistance amendment signed. Maintenance corridor accessed using fragments awarded as incidental salvage, route authority token claimed. Each sentence was a stone in a wall. Bastian interrupted 6 times. Elira marked all 6. Finally, Examiner Crowe said, even if this sequence is accurate, the token is a labyrinth artifact recovered during a sponsored party raid. It belongs under lead claim pending noble review. No, I said. The hall quieted. I held up the black token. It is not a treasure artifact, it is root authority. Crowe's expression flickered. He knew that term. Maybe not fully, but enough to fear it. Elira's eyes sharpened like drawn steel. Root authority is covered under dungeon discovery law, not salvage distribution. Bastian snapped, he's a porter. Discovery law does not require noble blood, Elira said. The hall like that, I could feel it. Crowe stepped closer. Do you understand what you are claiming, Ashkeel? Yes. Root authority requires proof of original pathway identification, confirmed pattern recognition, and dungeon acknowledgement. I lifted the receipt. To everyone else, it looked like a stained scrap of paper now. The receipt had become visible but not readable, just enough for the world to know something existed. The labyrinth acknowledged me. Bastian pointed, that is a supply receipt. It was. Crowe's voice went cold. Enough, seize the artifact pending review. 2 guild guards moved. The token chilled in my palm. Behind the guild hall, beneath stone, the official root crystal pulsed. I felt it through the token like a heartbeat. Minor door command was not useful in a guild hall. But root authority was not about doors. It was about records. Before seizure, I said, I request activation of the Black Antler root record under active dispute. Elira inhaled softly. Examiner Crowe went still. Bastian looked between us. What does that mean? Oh, Bastian. That was the first honest question he had asked all day. Elira answered before his uncle could stop her. If a dungeon root authority token is genuine and tied to an official crystal, the guild must review the dungeon's record before ruling on a root dispute. Bastian scoffed, dungeons don't keep witness statements. No, I said, they keep roots. I pressed the token to the iron plate set into the guild floor, the one every hunter walked across without noticing. The old root crystal under the hall answered. Ember light spread across the floor. Not words, not readable text. The no-nonsense magic of the guild did not need paragraphs. It projected movement. A map of light rose in the air above us, the Black Antler outer ring drawn in glowing lines, 5 human markers, one labeled by color not name as registered route lead, one smaller marker tied to porter allocation, supply weights, door activations, trap pulses, warnings logged as hazard notices, orders marked as responsibility transfers. The hall went silent. Then the record began moving from the start. Everyone saw Bastian choose the moss corridor after my warning. They saw the trap reset. They saw chalk transfer to him. They saw the fake treasure room activate after he crossed the threshold. They saw me deploy the stretcher. They saw him discard the ration tin. They saw scavenger waves follow the supply path. They saw the temporary amendment signed. They saw him order me to get the party out. They saw the maintenance node acknowledge my 3 confirmed patterns. Then his accusation echoed through the projection, not as sound, but as a red dispute flare tied to the registry vent. Sabotage claim initiated by route lead. Route record sealed. The map branched into decision lines. Every ignored warning glowed amber, every direct order glowed blue, every responsibility transfer glowed white. Bastian's face drained of color. Selene took 1 step away from him. Melis covered her mouth. Audric stared at the projection like a man watching a bridge collapse behind him and realizing who had cut the ropes. Examiner Crowe said nothing. Elira did. Record shows Porter issued 3 immediate hazard warnings within visible range. Record shows route lead ignored all 3. Record shows route lead transferred route assistance only after becoming lost. Record shows authority token acknowledged Porter Rovan Ashkeel after confirmed pattern demonstration. Record shows sabotage accusation contradicted by route sequence. Her voice carried through the hall. Every hunter heard it. Bastian tried to recover. That projection is incomplete, it doesn't show intent. No, I said, it shows consequences. That was worse for him. Intent can be polished, consequences arrive dirty and honest. Crowe raised one hand, this requires private review. The hall erupted. Hunters might tolerate corruption in theory, but nobody likes watching a route record get buried in daylight, not when they have to trust guild maps with their own lives. A bronze scout shouted, private review, he nearly got them sealed in a lure room. Someone else called, if route records can be hidden, our contracts are worthless. Hask's voice boomed from the supply counter, and I want my ration tin reimbursed. That broke the tension just enough for people to laugh. But Bastian did not laugh. His career was bleeding out in public, and there was no corridor to abandon it in. Elira stepped toward the examiner. Under Guild Law 42, active dungeon record disputes involving route authority must be witnessed by no fewer than 3 unaffiliated license holders. 3 hands rose immediately. Then 7. Then 20. Crowe looked at the room and made the political calculation Bastian never learned to make. He abandoned his nephew without moving a muscle. Very well, he said, public review. Bastian turned to him, Uncle. Crowe's eyes hardened, be silent. There are few sounds more satisfying than a powerful man discovering he is now a liability to someone more powerful. The formal review took 40 minutes. Elira led it because she knew the law and because Crowe could not be trusted to hold a spoon without bending it toward family interest. 3 unaffiliated license holders stood witness, a healer, a bronze scout, and an old trap-breaker with one glass eye who kept muttering, beautiful record clarity, like he wanted to marry the projection. The conclusion was not mercy. It was procedure. Bastian Crowe had ignored documented hazard warnings. Bastian Crowe had misassigned and then attempted to conceal route responsibility. Bastian Crowe had discarded guild supplies inside an active dungeon. Bastian Crowe had made a false sabotage accusation against a registered porter. Bastian Crowe had attempted to claim route authority without completing pattern confirmation. Bastian Crowe's provisional route lead status was suspended immediately. His hunter license was frozen pending tribunal. His Black Antler claim was void. His party shares were held for penalty assessment. His uncle's authorization practices were referred to Central Guild audit. That last one made Elira look happier than the rest. Cellini and Mayles received formal reprimands for supporting a false complaint after witnessing contradictory events. Audric received a warning, but his statement that I had provided accurate route guidance reduced the penalty. He looked embarrassed when he thanked me. I accepted it. Not warmly, not coldly. Just accepted. Because the point of consequences is not to become the cruelest person in the room. It is to stop letting cruel people control the room. Then came the part Bastian truly hated. The Black Antler Discovery bonus transferred to me. Not all of it at once. The guild was still the guild. There were processing fees, certification holds, hazard deductions, and 3 different stamps required because bureaucracy survives even magic. But the provisional award was enough to pay for Nira's medicine for 2 full years. 2 years. I had died for less. The guild also recognized me as Veyer's first provisional dungeon route master. A title nobody had used in this era. The hall did not cheer immediately. People needed a moment to understand what they had seen. A porter had entered as luggage. He had come out as the person the dungeon answered. Bastian understood before most of them. That was why he lunged for the token. He did not get far. The root crystal flashed. The iron plate under his boots locked his shadow to the floor for exactly 3 seconds. Not harmful, deeply humiliating. The old trap breaker with the glass eye whispered, delighted, minor authority response. I looked at Bastian, frozen mid-reach, one hand out, face twisted. Careful, I said, the door objects. When the shadow hold released, he staggered. Nobody helped him. That was the first real silence of his life, I think, the silence where status stops cushioning the fall. Consequences spread through Vare faster than dungeon mold. By sunset, every tea stall near the east gate had a version of the story. By nightfall, the salvage brokers were arguing about route authority pricing. By morning, 3 guild clerks had pretended they always respected porters, and 2 noble parties had quietly revised their contracts to specify hazard warning procedures. Elira found me outside the infirmary dispensary, where I had just paid for 26 vials of moonlung medicine in advance. She looked tired, damp, and extremely pleased with herself. "Your sister?" she asked. "Yes." "Will she be all right?" "For 2 years at least." "That is not the same as all right." "No," I said, "but it is better than 9 days." She nodded like she understood exactly how heavy 9 days could be. Nira was sleeping upstairs, so I did not invite Elira in. Not yet. My sister had lived most of her life watching me come home exhausted, underpaid, and apologizing for things that were not my fault. I wanted the first good news to be quiet. Elira handed me a folded paper. "What is this?" "Notice of Independent Audit into Examiner Crowe's Provisional Clearances." I opened it. His name sat at the top. Bastian's was listed as related party. 3 other sponsored raids were marked for review. "You move quickly," I said. "I count quickly." That made me smile. She leaned against the dispensary wall. "You realize people will come for the token?" "Yes." "Some politely." "Yes." "Some not." "I have minor door authority and a growing distrust of visitors. That will help with doors, less with politics." She was right, obviously. That was the annoying thing about competent allies. "What do you suggest?" I asked. "Certification, public, formal, layered in so much procedure that stealing from you becomes inconvenient." Inconvenient is underrated. I also suggest not joining another noble-sponsored party for at least a month. I was thinking longer. "Good." Her expression softened slightly. "You could consult." I laughed. I was a porter this morning. And by afternoon, half the guild learned their maps are not as reliable as their egos. You understand a dungeon method nobody else has named yet. Pathway accounting. The word sat behind my teeth. Future knowledge is dangerous when spoken too early. Say too much and people call you mad. Prove too much and they call you property. So I said, I understand enough to start with outer rings. Elira caught the caution and respected it, then start there. Bastian tried to bargain on the second day. Not directly. People like him rarely begin directly after public disgrace. First came a messenger from his family offering reimbursement for miscommunication distress, 50 silver, if I signed a statement saying the Black Antler incident resulted from unusual dungeon behavior, not negligence. I sent the messenger back with one sentence. Dungeons behave unusually when led by unusually careless men. The second offer was 2 gold and a private apology. I declined. The third offer included reinstatement under a Crow-sponsored route team with improved status. That one made me laugh so hard Nira coughed herself awake and asked if I had been poisoned. No, I told her, just offered employment by a collapsing building. She did not know the whole story yet. I gave her the gentler version first. I had found a new certification, earned a bonus, and Bastian Crowe would no longer control my contracts. She was 16, thin from illness, and much sharper than people expected. So he tried something awful and you made paperwork bite him, she asked. I considered that. Yes. Good. Then she went back to sleep with one hand curled around a medicine vial like it might vanish. That was when the victory finally hurt. Not because I regretted it. Because the first timeline had trained me to survive crumbs. 2 years of medicine felt impossible. A certification felt impossible. Being believed felt so impossible that my body did not know where to put the relief. I sat by the window until dawn, holding the route token and listening to Vare wake around the dungeon gates. The receipt had changed again. No longer just a torn strip. It was still stained, still old, still mine, but when I unfolded it, the blank back now held 3 branching root lines. Confirmed patterns retained. Ledger capacity expanded. Next milestone, outer ring comparative accounting. It wanted more dungeons. Of course it did. A living logistics system had given a dead porter a ledger and expected him to keep working. Honestly fair. The Iron Lantern Guild summoned me on the 4th day for certification terms. I arrived in my cleanest coat, which was still patched at both elbows. Hask gave me a nod from the supply counter. Audric, standing near the job board, looked away first, then forced himself to approach. I should have listened earlier, he said. Yes. He flinched a little. I let the silence sit for one breath, then added, you listened eventually. He nodded. For what it's worth, I gave a full statement. I know. Bastian's finished. No, I said, Bastian is facing the beginning of what he earned, that's different. Audric absorbed that like a shield taking impact. Then he said, if you ever need someone to stand in front while you count dungeon breathing, I'd apply. That surprised me. The first timeline had made it easy to hate all of them equally, but memory is not justice. Audric had been weak, loyal to the wrong man, slow to question. He had not stolen my maps. He had not smiled when I was abandoned. I'm not hearing yet, I said. Yet. We'll see. He accepted that. Inside the review room, Elira sat beside 2 senior auditors and 1 central guild representative in a gray cloak. Examiner Crowe was absent, very absent, the kind of absent that meant someone higher had decided he should stop speaking in public. The representative explained the terms. I would receive Provisional Route Master certification limited to Black Antler's outer ring and any dungeon where I personally confirmed 3 logistical patterns under observation. I would be allowed to register independent route surveys. I would receive 70% of the Black Antler Discovery bonus after penalty deductions. 10% would go to the Guild Archive. 10% to Hazard Review. 10% to witness fees and crystal maintenance, because apparently even Justice had administrative overhead. I signed. I read every line first. Twice. Elira looked proud of that. When the representative asked if I had any conditions, Bastian's first timeline flashed through me. Stolen maps, stolen shares, stolen credit, my name reduced to a footnote under porter loss. Yes, I said. All route surveys under my authority must list every porter, scout, trap assistant, healer and support worker by name. Role limits must be written before entry. Hazard warnings must be logged at exit, accepted or ignored. Salvage awards under 5 copper must still be recorded if they trigger dungeon mechanisms. One senior auditor blinked. That is unusually specific. I have an unusually specific skill. Elira covered her smile with her hand. The gray-cloaked representative reviewed the conditions. Approved for your surveys, recommended for wider policy review. That was how change actually starts. Not with a speech. With a clause. After the meeting, Elira walked me to the main hall. You know, she said, half the city still thinks you got lucky. Good. Good. If they think I'm lucky, they'll keep underestimating the method. And if they underestimate the method, I'll have time to improve. She smiled then, a real one, small but real. You are more dangerous than you look, Rovan Ashkeel. I'm a porter, looking harmless was part of the uniform. Bastian's tribunal happened 9 days later. I attended because Elira said the root authority claimant had the right to witness final judgment, and because some doors should be watched while they close. He looked smaller without the blue cloak. Not poor, not broken, let's be honest. Men like Bastian land on cushions even when they fall from towers. But he looked diminished, and for someone who fed on admiration, that was its own punishment. The tribunal stripped his active hunter license for 3 years. 3 years. In guild terms, that was a lifetime. His sponsorship contracts dissolved. His pending salvage claims froze. His family paid fines for false reporting and supply negligence. Examiner Crowe was transferred to a records monastery in the northern hills, which sounded peaceful until you remembered records monks wake before dawn and audit candle usage. Bastian tried one final performance. He turned to me in the tribunal hall and said, "I made one mistake." That was the closest he could come to apology. I shook my head. "No," I said, "you made the same choice 16 times, the dungeon just counted." He had no answer. That was satisfying. Not because he suffered. Because the truth stood without needing me to shout. After the tribunal, I walked to the Black Antler gate alone. Not inside, not yet. I stood under the arch where warm air breathed out in 9-second cycles and watched rain clouds gather over the quarry. 5 years ago, in another version of my life, I had crawled through that darkness believing I had lost everything. My maps, my name, my chance to save Nira, my future. But the labyrinth had been watching Roots. It had watched Bastian abandon me. It had watched me learn while dying. And somehow, impossible as it still felt, I had woken up in the alley with the one thing no thief knew how to steal. The pattern. I touched the token. A minor service hatch opened near the arch, just a finger width, like the dungeon was peeking at me. "Not today," I told it, "I'm off duty." The hatch closed. I laughed then, alone in the rain, because after 2 lives of carrying other people's burdens, even a dungeon had started respecting my schedule. I did not become strong because I found a legendary blade, inherited noble blood, or shouted louder than the people who hurt me. I became strong because I came back informed, counted what everyone else ignored, and let every careless step write its own consequence.